tied into what's going on that we are so much into these conversations that are happening on the internet, even some of the romances that are happening on the internet, and not really thinking about having these relationships face to face. I mean, we've talked on this show before about how you can live in an apartment complex or in subdivisions where there's houses next to each other all the time. I mean, I live in an apartment complex here in Durham. I try to make it a point if I see certain people to say hello to them and say at least pass them a greeting and everything. But you have people that are living right next to each other that have no contact and don't even know the names of their neighbors and are right there. And at the same time, those same people are probably on the computer talking to somebody in Timbuktu and Russia. And acting like those people are just as close as the ones that are right next to them. And those people that are right next to them, if something was to jump off, like, you know, somebody was to, and I'm not trying to put it in a negative standpoint, but somebody was to break into their house and they would have to report that while they were at work and everything, that person in Russia ain't going to be able to do but so much help. They're in Russia. The person that's your next door neighbor can help you tremendously. They're right next to you. They can help you. You know, if you got to go through stuff and try to figure out, because a lot of times we don't even know what we got in our own house. But if they can help you go through your stuff and, you know, look through your clothes and be like, look, if you think about it, I'm missing X, Y, and Z sweater. And they help you realize that that's the sweater that you're missing. That's actually people that are right there with you, whereas these other folks aren't there. So I was wondering if the book talks about this new world society that we have where we seem to be more attached to people that aren't necessarily with us, and where we're paying attention to whether people like us on Twitter or Facebook, even comes back to Trump, or whether they're liking us on whatever the social media is. And I know social media is important. You even mentioned that you're going to use social media to get your book out, but I'm just saying, how do you deal with this other aspect of social media where it seems like it's digging into self-worth and not helping self-worth? It's actually a form of pseudo-self-worth.
So there's a chapter on social media, and on social media I go in. It's very tricky because I use as an example being a performing artist. I do African dance. I was a former radio host playing music as well as having a talk show. These are areas where you work on your craft. You work on whatever it is that you're doing, and you have the potential to feel good about that. I use Vegan Flavor Cafe as a perfect example. I'll take a picture of my food. My goal is to get people to see the picture and like it. But if I don't get any likes, the food and the image, that's still there. I made the food, it tasted good. Whomever tasted it and experienced it, hopefully they liked it. I made it, I tasted it tasted great. I'm putting it out there for everybody to see. If I don't get likes for whatever reason, I still feel great about this food that I prepared. The reason why I love this book and the concept of it is you have to be honest with yourself. What are you expecting when you put this picture or this post out there? Do you have this thing where you are going for likes, or you go, and I talk about this, are you going for likes? Are you going for followers? Or are you going to share your experience and your anticipation is that people will appreciate your experience? I will put a picture out there anticipating that people will appreciate it, but I'm not going to have any action or inaction if I only get 12 likes from it. But the folks who are making decisions and they say, you know what, I only got 12 likes, so next time what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a picture and I'm going to take my shirt off and I'm going to hold the plate in front of me so that I can muster up some more likes. At least the ladies will appreciate my body. You know, something like that. If you're operating at a pseudo self-worth, when you put a post on social media, that's the way your thought process might go.
Right.
So there are certain things where I was talking about the performing artist. I do African dance. If I work very hard and I finesse the choreography and I do some really intricate dancing, and I go out on stage and what I do doesn't resonate with the audience, to the extent that I would have wished that more people would have appreciated it, I at least know that I gave a great performance, which is different from going out on stage, having not rehearsed well, not execute the movements well, and I get a standing ovation. I'm still going to go off that stage feeling horrible about how I performed, because at that point, the standing ovation didn't matter. That's great that they appreciated it, but in being honest with me, I didn't do well. I didn't do my best. I need to do better. So it can't be that the motivational force is how people respond to you if you're going to put that ahead of how you responded to yourself.
Yeah,
your first commitment is what are you doing to self?
Yeah, and I think a lot of times people don't understand that, because I even come back to myself. As you know, I'm involved in a lot of things, including, which we didn't have this year, the Blues Festival and everything. And I can't tell you how many times people would come up to me and they'd be like amazed at the performance and everything. But because I'm backstage, either doing MC work or helping with some of the artists and everything, they'll come up to me like a week later and they'll be like, did you see such and such give this great performance? And they don't seem to understand, or they don't want to acknowledge that they understand that that's a work moment for me. So, like, they're trying to describe something that is appealing from the artist to from the performer to the audience. Now, there are some times that I might see the performance and I can have that shared experience, but a lot of times we're in the mode of production mode. So we don't see necessarily what's going on because that's not the mode we're in. So then they're shocked that we didn't see what they saw because we're not in that mode. Whether it's me, whether it's somebody that you know like Ngoma, we're not in that mode. So we're not there to see that. We're in a different mode. So when you have this conversation with them, there's a lot of times that they're shocked because they're going like, did you see such and such? And they're just appalled that you didn't see it. And, you know, sometimes we regret that we missed that moment, but that's not what our purpose was at that moment. So we can't necessarily – we can understand why they are feeling that we should have seen that moment, but at the same time we have to understand, like you said, what our purpose is in what we were doing. So we also have to understand that we missed that for a reason.
Yep. A lot of times we feel good just sharing good news. We feel good about ourselves because we're the person that gets to share the good news. I use this. I don't know if I think I did talk about this in the book, but this is one of my lifelong, I say lifelong, I guess as I was old enough to drive, one of my frustrations, traffic jam. You're in a traffic jam.
Right.
You're upset because traffic is moving slowly. You have to be somewhere. You can't wait for it to pick up. You're hoping it's going to pick up around the next bend. Finally, it picks up. Then what you find happening is that it's slow, not because the road is blocked, but because everybody's looking to see what happened.
Right.
This is what I realized using myself as an example from a pseudo-self-worth standpoint. I wanted to see something that was worthy enough for me to tell the story when I got to wherever I was going. Because at that point, I would be the center of attention. So it didn't necessarily have to be carnage, but it had to be something that was going to be worthwhile for me to walk into the place and say, y'all won't believe what I saw. And everybody's going to say, what? And now you have the floor, and now you get to tell everybody your story. That is pseudo-self-worth. And when I realized that's what I was doing, every time I drove past an accident, I intentionally did not look, especially because I was the same one getting upset when I was at the back of the line, wondering why I wasn't moving faster. So I was part of the problem. When I realized I was part of the problem and I was exhibiting pseudo-self-worth, I said, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm only sending energy of prayers, and hopefully everybody's safe, and I'm not looking. And as soon as I get the chance to go forward, I'm going forward. So that was something else that was an inspiration for writing the book, quite frankly. That was one of those inspirational moments where I said, look at what you're doing and think about all these other people who do that, who want to be that center of attention and tell that story, even if it's a graphic, even if there was a fatality, they want to tell it. They want to say, yeah, man, it was blood all over the place. I saw the person fly 50 feet up in the air. Sometimes pseudo self-worth will have us do whatever it takes to get that attention and energy from people. And that's why this book was so important to me.
Oh, it's very important. And for those folks that want to reach out to you to learn more about both the book, the vegan lifestyle, the workshop, things of that nature, what's the best way for folks to reach out to you? We'll wind it down. I think we got about another 10 minutes or so within the show. But if they want to reach out to you and find out more about what you're talking about, what's the best way to reach you?
The best way is probably the email, which is info, I-N-F-O, at veganflavorcafe.com, and that's vegan, V-E-G-A-N, flavor, F-L-A-V-A, cafe, C-A-F-E.com. At that point, I'd be happy to give my number, but I already have a lot of activity on my phone with food-related stuff that if they want to talk about the book, we'll start off with the email correspondence. And also, I am on the primary social media outlets. I almost said I'm on the Facebook, but then I was going to sound like I was old, so I had to change that around. I'm on Facebook. If you type in Yah-I, Y-A-H-I, Safari, you'll find me there. On Twitter and on Instagram, I'm on as Vegan Flavor Cafe.
So they can definitely find you that way as well. And before we wrap up and everything, how do you find that the whole concept of self-worth, and maybe one that you can't answer in 5 minutes, or maybe you have to give a teaser and have you back on another show, but how do you find that the whole concept of self-worth plays out in both our relationships, be that marriage or dating kind of concepts, as well as the job?
It's amazing that you asked that question, because the final chapter is about relationships. And what I did when I was writing this book, I actually put down 2 other books. I was started to write 2 other books that I'm going to continue. One of those books was the Being Better by Eating Better, which is now the workshop, but that's going to be the book as well. The other book was Boys Get Some, Men Give It Up. And that is essentially the title of the chapter on relationships. Relationships, I saved that for last because that is the heavy, heavy, heavy hitter. That's the one that I look forward to people really, really coming to terms with, because so much of what we do, especially if we meet someone, so much of what we do is rooted in pseudo self-worth. I want to give them the best impression of who I am. Not everyone, but most folks, they're going to wear their finest wares and, the whole brand name phenomenon, and not that you are necessarily reflecting pseudo self-worth if you get rims on your car, but, if you spend thousands of dollars to put rims on your car to make it look nicer, who do you want it to look nicer for? What do you want the end result to be? So there are a lot of things that we do in relationships to get energy and attention from people, and it makes us feel good. Makes us feel really good to bring a smile to somebody's face, or to make them feel good when we bought them this, that, or the other. There's something else that my wife and I do called love being apart, and I alluded to it earlier, where you love being apart from everybody, and you really love to take that time to spend with yourself and grow and develop, as well as loving being a part of a relationship, of a union. So when you're loving being apart from, that means you're into yourself, that means you're celebrating yourself, that means you're in this sincere self-worth piece. But if you are not loving yourself, and if you are in need of a relationship, that relationship is not going to be as effective because